Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This video is kind of a follow-up to the last video that I posted in which I sat down with my friend Jess and we talked about her business that she co-founded called Path Nutrition and all about how her business really pairs nutrition with life coaching and gives clients a new perspective on how they look at nourishing themselves, how they look at food and exercise and the choices that we all have to make every single day when it comes to what we put in our bodies. So I have been a client of theirs since June, I think, of this year. And I wanted to make this video to explain a little bit about how I came to discover Path Nutrition, how I met Jess, and why I decided to take the leap and enter into a 12-week long or 12-session long engagement with them as a client. I want to start with how I met Jess. I met Jess at a show here in Austin. We were at Moody Theater. What were we seeing? Oh, STS9. And somehow we were talking during the show and it came up that she was a life coach, and I don't know, it just struck me at the right time. It was something that I had been really discussing a lot with only my sister and maybe a handful of very, very close friends, that I was really struggling with my relationship to food, and had been since I was a teenager, but it just kind of was peaking or was particularly noticeable last spring, and I wanted to do something about it. I didn't want to feel like I was just destined to have this very tumultuous relationship to food and to my body and to my mind for the rest of my life. And I had done, last year was just, or I guess this past year, this is kind of a 2019 reflections while we're at it, but this past year was a huge development year for me. I invested a lot in myself. I invested a lot in my mental health, and I wanted to get my physical health up to par with that as well. That's how I met Jess. She told me to schedule kind of an initial discovery call with her and her partner so that they could understand what I was looking to get out of these sessions a little bit better, and I ended up doing that. Now, let me give you the backstory to what got me to this point. Also, I'm freezing right now in my house, so that's why I'm wearing this ridiculous leopard print winter coat. I have had a, let's call it unhealthy / tumultuous / disordered relationship to food since I was a teenager. So since I was probably 15, that's when I really started noticing that all of a sudden I felt much more conscious of what I was eating. I felt much more restrictive. It was truly like the start of a new and a different relationship to myself than the one that I had had throughout my adolescent childhood leading up until this time when I was 15. It's also the time that I really started experimenting with alcohol, and I think that that had a lot to do with all of a sudden realizing that I could be kind of reckless. I remember a couple of my girlfriends and I would go throughout the day at school and have a contest to see who could eat the least amount of food in the day, which now saying it out loud is kind of infuriating. The fact that we were privileged kids who got to go to school, B, who had a choice of eating as much or whatever we wanted if we wanted it, yet we chose to compete on who could starve themselves the most. I mean, it's so bizarre. Like, I know that. And it's even more bizarre because I know that teenage girls are still dealing with these same mentalities who are going through high school today. And it's just nuts to think that we really haven't evolved all that much when it comes to teaching girls how to relate to their own bodies and teaching young women how to nourish themselves and how to embrace their growing bodies. It was just a weird time. I just always had this mentality with food that like less is better, that if I did eat something bad, like, I mean, that could be bread, that could be pasta, that could be a muffin. That list of bad foods only grew larger and larger and larger as I got older. I mean, the list of my bad foods grew to the extent where having an apple with peanut butter was bad because apples have sugar and fructose in them, and peanut butter is really high in calories. And it was just like, it got to the point where I couldn't do anything without feeling bad about it, without punishing myself for it. And it really, I mean, at the end of the day, had nothing to do with the food. It had to do with needing and wanting to control something, anything that for whatever reason I felt like I needed to grasp control of. And maybe it was missing from another area of my life, and this was one area in which I could seek that control and take that control back. It just kind of escalated and wavered like up and down throughout my teens and 20s. I would have good days and bad days. I would have good months and bad months. But when it was bad, it was really bad. So, and no one can punish you worse than you can punish yourself. That's, at least in my case, that's certainly true. And eventually, I just got sick of going through that cycle of punishment and reward, and it got to a point where I couldn't take it anymore, and I wanted to get better, and I wanted to learn about why I was behaving the way that I was with food. So when I discovered PATH, it was really a turning point, because I knew that Jess was a friend, and so once I committed to doing the 12 sessions, like, I was committed. I wasn't able to get out of it. But for today's video, I did want to focus on how I've learned to nourish myself and how I've learned to cope with my disordered eating. And I have 5 kind of lessons that I've learned and that I've taken with me after my 12 sessions with PATH. So lesson number 1 is food is neutral. It only means something when you make it mean something. So keeping my emotions separate from the foods I choose to eat is really, really important in my recovery and in my relearning how to engage with food. Food is neutral. The food should not elicit one emotion or another from me. It is simply food. Number 2 is protein will always make you feel full the longest. So I was just in mental battles with myself as to what to eat. I never know what to eat. It was always this fight with myself or with whoever I was with of what do we eat? I don't know. What do you feel like? I don't know. And I so many times either went without eating, especially breakfast. That was the biggest offender, because I would just be I don't have time for this. It's the morning. I've got to rush off to work. I don't know what I'm going to eat, so I'll just go to work and I'll figure it out later. And of course, cut to later, and I'm in the middle of a meeting, hangry as fuck, haven't eaten anything, my blood sugar's super low, and yeah, just gets ugly. So one thing that PATH helped me with was just establishing what makes me feel full the longest. If I'm getting up and rushing out the door in the morning, I need to have something in my stomach to get me through those morning hours of work or whatever until lunch. And protein is the thing, protein in any form, by the way, is the thing that is going to make me feel full and sustain my energy the longest. Number 3 is meditate on your cravings and urges. In the previous video, we talked a little bit about using your prefrontal cortex to actually plan for your meals, plan the day ahead of time, know what you're going to eat, so that you're not making these cravings-based, lizard brain-based decisions on what you're going to eat in that moment the day of, because you're so hungry and you're just God, just give me something. At the same time, when you do have a craving, even if you're not starving, but you're just, maybe you're sitting on the couch, it's 9 o'clock at night, you're watching Netflix, and you're just oh my God, I am craving ice cream so badly. Sit with that craving for a few minutes. meditate on that craving for a few minutes and try to understand where it's actually coming from. It might be that, like, sure, you really just do want ice cream. If you sit with that craving for 10, 15, 20 minutes and you still land on that conclusion, great, go get the ice cream. But if you sit on that craving for 20 minutes and kind of start to feel like, oh, like, maybe it's not actually the ice cream that I want, like maybe I'm craving some type of like dopamine release, or I really need to like talk to a friend right now, like maybe I'm lonely or I'm just bored. That's been really helpful for me to understand where certain urges come from, because sometimes food is just happens to be the quickest fix for whatever emotion you're trying to quell in that moment. So sit with your cravings. Number 4 is restriction isn't a bad thing, it's part of life. It's only bad if you create the negative connotation around it. It's the lens that you place over the restriction that determines whether it is punishment or whether it's actually protecting you and self-preservation in some way. Okay, lastly, number 5, nourishment is the goal every time I eat. I've spent so much time painstakingly analyzing every little morsel of food that enters my body in the past 15 years. Holy shit, I can't even tell you. Having gone through this coaching program and having done a lot of self-education, I can now sit back and say that every time I go to eat, the goal is simply nourishment. So I think, yeah, for me, this one is really just about like every time I eat, I just need to think about how is this nourishing my body, even if it's just a matter of getting calories in because that's the only option I have right now. That's okay. That still counts. Those are my 5 big lessons when it comes to nutrition and eating for 2019, and I hope that this resonated with some of you who've also experienced or know someone who's experienced disordered eating and weird relationships to food. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and click to subscribe to my channel. I put out new videos every week, and I will see you guys next week.